Hi everyone. Eric Thomas once wrote, "I don't need an alarm clock, my passion wakes me in the morning." As we start in our new series that we're going to focus on God's passion in our lives and how we live out those passions on a daily basis, I want you just for a moment to think about your journey this morning. What did you feel like when you woke up this morning? What was the overarching thought? What was the overarching emotion? Was it passion or was it something else? Was it lethargy or was it uncertainty or was it just pure tiredness? I started a career in investment banking some 20 years ago, and I thought that what I was waking up to every morning, this energy that drove me, this thing that drove me out of bed and into the office, I thought it was passion. A few years into my journey and into my career, I realized though that it was ambition that was driving me. Fast forward a few years into the global financial crisis, I realized what it felt like and what it meant to wake up in the morning driven by fear. I remember so clearly that moment when I woke up in the morning waiting for one of our counterparties, one of the transactions that we had done, to fall over, as some of the investment banks did during that point in time. I remember reading the news feeds on my little BlackBerry and trying to think of solutions for the problems that the world had created in our little space. You know, it was only a few years after that experience, a few years after experiencing ambition, a few years after experiencing fear, that I was drawn through the Spirit of God into living a life that is driven by passion. Passion that only gets ignited once you've journeyed with God in a world where He calls you for a very, very particular reason, for a very particular purpose. Then I realized what it meant to wake up in the morning, to want to wake up in the morning, and to be driven by passion as opposed to anything else. Fast forward again a few years later, and something crept into my being that resembled the lethargy, that resembled the fear, that resembled the uncertainty of my past. And I couldn't figure out what it was. I knew that I was in God's calling for my life. I knew that the business that we have embarked upon building was exactly what God had purposed for me and for the people around me. But still, that fear and that tiredness and that uncertainty crept into my being. During the next few weeks, I want to share with you what God revealed to me during those days and during those times. I want to share with you some personal stories on how God met me in my place of uncertainty and tiredness and how He reignited my passion in my life. If you're one of the guys and girls that are listening to this and you know what it feels like to be driven by passion through calling, but you also know what it feels like to be tired and to doubt your passion, this series is just for you. I just mentioned the word doubt. I realized that the enemy came and he started sowing doubt into my mind as it relates to my calling and as it relates to my life. What do I mean by doubt? What do I mean by reasonable doubt? A story is told in the US of a court case that happened. Now in the US, they've got a jury system that have to decide on these cases. The problem with this case, though, is that there was a murder case without a corpse. It made the job of a jury a bit difficult. However, during the course of this whole court case, it was very clear that the defendant was guilty. As a last-ditched effort, his attorney stood up in his final statements and he looked the jury straight in the face and he said to them, "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, in the next 5 minutes, the corpse that you thought we were thinking about and talking about during this court case will be walking through the door in the back." The whole jury and the whole courtroom turned their heads to look at the door. The attorney then said, "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, because you looked at the door, all of you looked at the door, it means that there's reasonable doubt in your mind, and hence you have to find my defendant, my client, not guilty." The jury retired and they came back even within 2 minutes. The foreman of the jury stood up and he found the defendant guilty. The attorney jumped up and he said, "How is this possible? There's reasonable doubt in your mind. Clearly you looked at the door." And the foreman very kindly and very calmly said, "Mr. Attorney, all of us looked at the door. The only person that did not look at the door was your client." Is reasonable doubt around your calling, around your passion, part of your life? Are you maybe the only person that knows that you feel that your calling is dead? Maybe the enemy has isolated you in a place where you can't speak to anybody. Maybe you can't speak to your spouse, your brother, your sister, your father, your friend. And I hope that this series will help you, will take you out of that place of isolation and give you a few tools to understand the place that you are in. The 3 things that we are going to journey through that ignite that doubt in our minds, and then some solutions on how to solve for it, are the following. Firstly, we're going to talk about what failure does, failure in our calling does to our confidence and to our living out of our calling and our passion. Then we're going to talk about success and what the drivers of success do in diverting our attention away from our calling. And then that characteristic that comes and bites us from behind, that word contentment, so many times just takes our attention and our energy away from what God has purposed in our lives. I'm looking forward to journey with you and to be part of God coming and reigniting the passion in your life. I'm looking forward to the next few weeks with you.